This is a channel where cool things happen. Sometimes. And I am your host, Todd Mariana, Deep Grooves Mastering, opcode 66. I'm gonna try. Hopefully, this is gonna be a little louder this time. Last time my mic was not very loud, so if anybody wants me to turn it up or down, please let me know in the comments, and I will try to respond to that quickly. We'll see where it's at. So, if you haven't been following this series, I have been working on the parts for this cutter head as well as another one. This is a Presto 1D. This is for cutting mono records. So the parts for it are all right here. And then I had cloned a replacement part for it. So this is the cloned damper. And also I have some springs. So I've got some springs here that I've cloned as well. And, excuse me, also some coils. So in this dish here are some coils. And so all together. Also, I worked on the magnet. So let me grab a screwdriver and show you guys this. So this is the horseshoe magnet for the electromagnetic system for this head. So cutter heads are very much like speakers. Speakers are transducers. They transcribe electrical impulses into physical movement of a diaphragm, which then causes air to move, and you hear it. So in this case, this electromagnetic system causes a stylus to move, and that stylus's movement is captured on disc, what you play when you play a record. Anytime you want to handle one of these magnets, you should really have a piece of steel across it. I'm putting it down right now someplace where it is on a steel housing for a soldering iron station, so it'll be fine there. But I did restore its charge, so I measured it with a Gauss meter, and I conditioned it so that it has even charge. It reads evenly on each side and in the places that it needs to in order to form the field that it needs to form. And basically the field that it forms is between the ends of that horseshoe magnet. So these are the ends. Let's just consider my thumbs being the rounded part of that magnet, and these are the ends. The field actually forms between the two ends and in the last bit of each. So there's a field that forms across the ends of that magnet. Here, let me grab it out again. And basically, the screwdriver itself is sort of demonstrating that right now. These fields are inside of here, and that's the flux density sort of, like that's where it's going to be for that magnet. There are pieces in here, which are the pole pieces, which help to channel and direct the flux and interact with the coils. So the coils are creating a magnetic charge based on the amplified signal that you're sending to the head over the wiring. And that varying field in the presence of a magnet with the pole pieces will cause, all of that together will cause this thing called an armature to move towards one side or the other, like this. It's on a pivot, and as the signal changes positive to negative, the field will change north to south, and you'll get this sort of tipping effect. I figured out how to use Blender, and I have created some animations. I posted a couple on my YouTube channel, but they're not the final one. So in a prior video, I had actually made a mistake when I had explained some of the mechanics, mostly because I just forgot one thing, which I'm going to go over tonight. That one thing is that it has to do with these coils, so I'll get to that in a second. In fact, I'm not going to use the coils that I'm going to install just in case. I don't want to mess those up. So I'm going to use another coil that I have just as an example so I can explain this to you guys real quick. So what I had done was I forgot, for whatever reason, that these guys, because I mean, I haven't done this for a little while. So it's not for whatever reason. It's because, I'm human and I haven't done this for a little while and I've been focused on other things. And so I forgot an aspect. So here we go. And I also got my remote out. So hopefully, yay, I can actually do this now with my remote control. So that's the start of the coil right there with the hole. And the end of the coil is right here. And this is not the hole, right? So that's the end. This is the start. And if you were to run electricity through this, right, one way, DC into the start, and it goes around, and it's all going around in the same direction. So right-hand rule applies, which means current's following your thumb, field is following your fingers, north to south. And basically what ends up happening is this. If it's DC, you get a field on one side, let's just say north, and you would get a south field on the other side. And so if you had two of these, right, and you were to supply electricity to them the same way, they will both have the same field. But here's where I messed up in my demonstration before, and I'm going to go into this in another video. So I'm going to make a whole other video that will describe this, along with animations that I made, that hopefully will clarify all of this in a better way than I'm doing right now. But anyway, the way that these are installed in the head is with the holes facing out on both sides. And there's main reason for that is just for convenience when you're actually going to do the wiring on these. If the holes were facing in, it would be far less accessible. And you'll see why when I go to put all this together than if they were facing out. So first of all, they're facing out on both sides, which means that this thing is reversed on the other side. On the other side, it's like that. And so if you were to run current into it the same way, right? So into the start, and let's say that would DC would cause this to be north and the other side to be south. And if I had another one where I was running that same current from the end of the first one into the start of the second one, right, then the polarity would be inverted. And because it's flipped around, right, you would be seeing the south on this side, not the north, right? So here we're seeing the north because that's the start. Okay? And then if I was to run electricity through another one the same exact way, but just turned it around, it's going to have inverted polarity. Well, that's where I screwed up in my demonstration to you guys before. And it's because I forgot about the fact that these two coils, though they are wired in series, are not wired in series the same way. So this is, let's say this is coil number 1. And let's say that this goes to one of the terminal poles. So on the wiring, let's say that this goes to the red, to the hot, right? Well, current goes through it and it comes out the end. And then, yes, it goes into another coil, the secondary one. And yes, that secondary coil is turned around physically, which should invert its polarity with respect to the other. However, you're not attaching the end of the first to the start of the second. You're attaching the end of the first coil, the end of it, to the end of the second coil, which is turned around. So if you are running current through backwards and you have turned it physically, you are now actually having the same polarity as the first coil. So this one, let's say this is north and that's south. Well, if I turn it around on the second one and I run it through backwards, this is going to be north, that's going to be south on the back. So it's going to match, even though it's turned around, it's going to match the front one because they're wired end to end. And that's the thing that forgot to, before I started my demonstration before. And so because of that, I sort of messed up my explanation of the mechanics, sort of. I mean, it still was correct in the sense that the coils are just simply amplifying the magnet, basically the magnetic field from the magnet, and the pole pieces are helping to make all of that happen. And they're shaped the way that they are in order to actually make that happen and to make the tilting happen. Hey puppy, my doggy I think wants to go for a walk, so I'm not sure how far we're gonna go tonight actually. And I wasn't even planning to finish this tonight. I just at least wanted to start. So this is definitely going to be a multi-part thing because it's a painstaking process and to do it right. And so you don't really want to rush through it. It's not something you probably can do very easily in just one sitting per se, like ever. So that all being said, this is definitely going to be multiple parts. And it's just because it's a bunch of work and I don't want to take a smoke break. Like tonight, I'm going to have to walk my dog at some point. So anyway, so back to this. The animation that I made is like a bunch of the 3D drawings from the Presto put together and then color coded to match phase of signal. And then I also have like a little animation of a sine wave going to sort of match all of that. So you get an idea as to really how the field is inside of the head as the two magnets are going, as they're being driven positive to negative on a sine wave. So anyway, that all being said, yeah, I am human and I do mess up, but I definitely can correct myself and look for this video on YouTube that I'm talking about that is a Blender animation that will more clearly show all of this. But that's basically what's going on. The two coils, again, the holes are facing out again so that, you can see the wire and then you do glue it down as a final step. So just accessibility, they face out. And then B, you do attach the two in series end to end. So each one of the coils, the start of it is attached to one of the terminals, hot or neutral, and red or black, and in this case, and again, the two of them are in series end to end, and inverted as far as the way they face. So actually, it's the same field, the same orientation of field on both, and that's actually what causes the imbalance, which causes the tipping. But again, look at the animation for that. This is tin plate, so it looks like it's steel wire, but it's not. This is actually tin plated copper, and actually it's a lot of people suggest this nowadays for internal type hookups for audio, like guitarists and stuff. The tinning has no effect on audio transmission over copper. In fact, some say it's better because it actually insulates it from oxygen and it won't oxidize. So I already prepared this. Also, too, I filmed a video where I show you how I do the twists in the wire. So I made a little tool, a little hand tool, and I show you guys how I use that to put the twists in. And then once I put the twists in, I will, because you want to twist wire to reduce inductance, crosstalk, or whatever, interference. Then I just use a little pieces of wire wrap, and I double wrap the ends right here, and then I put very small pieces right there, and I just twist on the caps like you're supposed to. So there's just friction holding the wire in the connector. There's no solder or anything. That's how that is prepared. Coils I showed in another video or in a prior stream. The only real difference was I ended up putting on 250 turns per and then sealed them with epoxy. So they are epoxy sealed. And that was slow drying epoxy. everything should be hunky-dory with those. Yeah, so the first thing that I generally will do with these guys is I will take a longish screwdriver so I can get good torque on it, and I will make sure that all of these screws on the body are nice and tight, because sometimes when you do the bath, some screws might get a little loose, the ultrasonic bath, that is. So you want to make sure that all of the bodies, and the ones that I'm looking at right now, I honestly think that they like Loctite those or something, because those are almost always, unless somebody's taken the head apart, those are always like super tight. And that one too, good. So all the body screws seem, yeah, like they were already, you know, fully tightened. So they did not loosen up as a result of the ultrasonic bath or me doing the hand polishing. And I didn't, again, most of the time they don't. They're not like that. Unless somebody's actually taken the head apart, you don't usually see that. Those are, really stuck in place generally. So I just wanted to double check that real quick. That being said, or done. We don't need this part yet. We will need those. So one of the first things that you got to do is to get the armature into the body, but you have to have the coils on the armature first, because the back one won't like slide onto the armature if the armature is already in place. So you kind of have to just make a whole little grouping of parts and put them all onto this together and then lock them into place. And when I say lock them into place, temporarily lock them into place. They're not, we're not going to actually lock. Also, too, the original springs on this head actually look okay. So I'm actually thinking about trying them out first and seeing what they sound like. Actually, now that I look at it, this one might be a little bent. Yeah, maybe not. Actually, that one is bent. Bummer. The one that's on the tip of my finger right now appears to be a little bent, and that you will see from people trying to make adjustments to these heads that don't know what they're doing, and they end up trying to screw it in to make the armature move one way, but they don't realize that it's already touching the pole piece, and all they're doing by screwing it further is bending that spring. And when they go to unscrew it, whoops, it's already bent, and it's messed up by that point usually. It's not too bad, I mean, but one of them looks a little tiny bit overcompressed, is what I would call that. So I don't know. We'll try them. We'll see what it's like. If they don't sound good, then I will change them out to mine. It's not hard to change that part out once the head's already built, so you can totally do that. It's not an issue. You have to retune it or whatever, but you don't have to take everything apart, is the point that I'm trying to make. You can remove those springs and replace them with others and leave everything else put together, and it's fine. It works fine. It's all good. So right now I'm pulling out sort of those parts. We don't actually need the locking screws, so these little guys right now, those are the locking set screws, and we don't need those at the moment. If anything, we just need the longer ones that actually hold the springs and the center pin. We need the armature, we need the pole pieces, and we need the screws for the pole pieces and the washers. And that's pretty much it. Once we get all of that stuff in place, then we can actually put the terminal block on, which is this guy, and we can put on the wiring and attach it on the back with the strain relief, and actually solder the wiring to the terminal block and solder the enamel to that wiring. But there's tons of stuff to do before then, so put this stuff away. Generally speaking, I will I will cover that enamel wiring, those leads that go up to the terminal block, with heat shrink. And I'm going to try a new trick this time around, because the heat shrink will bend. It gets, it gets a little floppy. If there's nothing solid underneath it, when it shrinks, it will have some little bends in it. So to avoid that, I'm going to give it a little bit of stiffness by adding something which is non-conductive, both electrical and magnetic non-conductive. This is just a little tiny piece of wood that I took off of a toothpick. Bleh. So it's rigid but non-conductive, and it won't warp with heat. So I can stick a little piece of this in with the wiring as well as the shrink wrap, and it will go over that and stay nice and rigid. Unlike in the past, where it's a little floppy. It doesn't look real nice, and also too, it's nice to have that wire lead within a rigid enclosed sheath, So that's what we're going to try this time around. Okay. So basically, I'll look in here. I see that there might be a little tiny bit of polish that I didn't get out of that one hole. I'm going to try to get rid of that real quick. Yeah, and then basically I'm just going to put the coils together with the armature and get them seated in the pole pieces correctly. And be very mindful of the wire leads, the very delicate leads. And once it's all seated, then we can start to work on covering that stuff and connecting it the way it needs to be connected. I'll take a little drink here, some grain alcohol. Oops. Woof. Okay. Better? I don't know. What's better? Is that? Okay. Oh, yeah. So, like I was just saying, guys have an orientation to them, and in fact, what I did was when I glued it, I made sure that the ends were coming off in a way such that when these are facing opposite directions, this is gonna be the end is going to be facing the same way on each of these. What it's doing right now. So it's gonna be a little delicate on this one, so I gotta be mindful of that. Dog is right behind my chair, so I can't really move at all. That sucks. I think it's like that. Better ones on the front. I have a particular orientation, and I'm trying to remember what it is off the top of my head. I'm gonna look back. You sure the fatter parts on Proper tension and even tension. Watching one of my prior streams, and that will live stream teardown of this. So if you get one of these heads and it sounds like something's clanging, like actually banging, that's how to put the bends in like that. I know how to video mixing. I do use clips from various distort to trace accurately. Those little pieces of metal are super important. So anyway, these guys just both come out. They were literally there was some, but more importantly, I never make adjustments to these tension springs. How to put the deep grooves mastering. They were, like no one that I know outside of one person who's Al Grundy had a bag of original replacement. They were literally there was some glue that you can still see a bit. Okay. So that makes a difference, and I haven't done these for a little while. So I'm consulting my material. The one of these little prongs is wider than the other one, and so the thicker ones actually go in the back, not the front. And yes, and that actually makes sense in my head now. The back ones would need more help because with the horseshoe magnet, as the field gets bent almost straight across, it's less strong the further you go towards the bend in the magnet. So let me not roll over my dog's paw. So what I'm saying here is field will start to go in between these two and fill this with flux density, but that field is less strong the further it gets away from the tip. The tip is where the field is going to be the most intense. It needs a little more help in the back. That's, in my estimation, why the back part of this pole piece is actually wider than the front. So just FYI, that's the orientation there. Look out, dude. Look out. Okay, cool. So, all right. And again, I just consulted my video on YouTube of one of the prior streams where I actually did the disassembly on this, and it shows you pretty clearly one point what's what, the orientation. So the washers on these are important because they really help to actually lock the pole pieces down in the appropriate place. So you absolutely need those washers on those screws, right? So if you don't have them, you will never find an off-the-shelf one that's a match. So you really have to just machine these, and you can totally machine those from bar stock. It's not terribly hard. You just end up wasting a lot of material using a parting tool to part such a thin little piece. You end up parting more material than you end up with as a washer. So you waste a lot of metal, but you can totally clone those. It's not hard. So let me real quick kind of put these together. show you how they go. So this is the armature. The armature sits in here on the knife edge. So there's a slot, a V slot in there. And there is a knife edge that it goes in against in there. And one note real quick is when you go and put these together, there's going to be a point where I will go and I make sure that, and this is where I actually go and tighten this thing down. I make sure that this thing is really exactly on the knife edge. And so how you can do that is, if you can sort of see here, let me zoom in. Whenever you have something on a track like that, if you, boy, this thing doesn't work that great. Okay. And I dropped it, so it's probably just easier to use the actual zoom on the camera. Okay, noted. So when you've got something on there that's got the reciprocal track like that, you can sort of rock it back and forth. Not a lot, because you don't want to like dig in a little bit, or dig in at all, I should say. But once it's on there, and your thumb is supporting it like I have, you can sort of rock it just a tiny bit, and you'll feel when that rocking turns into it seating exactly where it needs to be in that slot. And that's important because you do not want this to be seated incorrectly when you go and lock it down by doing the set screws with the leaf springs and the center pin. If you do that, you'll damage things. So make sure that you, before you actually lock it down, and I'll show you how to do this later, but just noting it right now. And you can try this too before you even put everything together. Get the feel of it with your, put it on there and say, okay, I rock it just a tiny little bit. Oh, oops, yeah, I got it right there. I feel that. It locks right in. Once you do it a couple times, you'll get the feel for it. But that's very important because, again, you don't want to just jam this thing down in there and have the knife edge on that V slot incorrectly and then actually put pressure against it and then have this thing start to pivot, teeter on that knife edge, because you'll just ruin the reciprocal V slot in the armature. Another thing to note, I mean, you might not be able to see particularly on camera, but there is a seam right there. If you see right above where my thumb is, there's a seam. So I've said this before. I think that these are either that's a result of casting, but I don't think it actually is. I think that these are actually micro welded together, and or there's threading inside of the hole that's right there, because you can see that there is a bit of a hole at the top of that V slot. It's exposing a hole, so that might be actually a tapped hole that this thing screws onto. I'm not sure. I've never actually tried to take one of these apart. But they're definitely made of multiple pieces, or at least that's what it seems to me. Obviously, the bottom part is screwed on, so that's definitely. And then this piece too seems to like be brazed or something, or just pressure pressed on, but I'm not sure. Anywho, so back to these guys. If there is micro welding, I don't really see any evidence of grinding, at least at that joint. So I think that that's actually screwed in there, or again, pressure fit, like together. I don't know. So I picked this one. I marked it with a little black dot. I picked that as the back. So I'm going to make that the back. This one's front. And actually, I'm messing up on camera. So let me turn that around and get it correct. Okay. That's going to go on. So basically, you want the starts to be, in the middle and with the wires facing up like I have, and the ends to be facing out on the same side because they get connected together. And so that's why when I set the glue, I made sure that one of them was turned around, because otherwise they'd be facing opposite directions. And, you could try to get this all together in your hands right now, like I'm trying to do with the pole pieces, but it's not as easy as it might appear, you know, because usually it's kind of a tightish fit. And so what I found to be the easiest thing to do is this. I'm just going to put that down. So typically what I end up doing is I will attach the pole pieces first, and not, you know, I don't screw them down super tight or anything. And so this is sort of the theme for all of this work, is to do it in stages and to do it little bits at a time. And once it's all done, then the entire system works, and it works the way it ought to. But it's hard to get everything perfect right up front. So don't try to do that. It's an iterative process. Oops. Okay. Somebody's not working with me here. And when I put them in, because there is some play to them, and so this is one of the humongous secrets to these guys right here that a lot of people don't quite understand. And this is the secret to tuning these heads. You see how this thing moves around? And not only does it move around, there's no guide, there's no recess, there's nothing on the body of this head that makes these sit in any particular way or place. There's tons of play to them. And that's the key, my friends. A lot of people think that the springs right here and adjusting them is how you tune these heads, and it's absolutely not. That's important to have them with equal tension, and to have the right amount of tension, but how you can actually make that work with everything else, because these were not 100% precision made, you know, there's some variances to some of the parts. And so in order to get the coils and the armature to set just right on the knife edge and in line with these holes, and you know, these holes might be just slightly off in one piece that they made and slightly off the other way on another piece. And so to account for that, these pole pieces have play. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the largest secret. And it took me a while to actually figure this out to these heads. So later, when I've got the coils in and the armature in, and I've got this electrically hooked up, I've got the wires all hooked up, I will attach the magnet and it will sit this way. So instead of it sitting this way, it will sit this way, and it will just touch the two pole pieces, but flipped out the other way. And that will allow me to adjust these pieces so that the coils and the armature are sitting just right. And you can hear it. You can not only hear it, you can feel it. Once everything is just right, just perfect, you're going to lock it down into place. And not only lock it down into place, you're going to put some glue on the coils. And I also like to put a little tiny bit of glue right there and right there, and maybe also right there, to keep the pole pieces from moving around. Because what happens is you use these heads, somebody's trying to cut a lot of volume, the coils are going to get hot. Once things get hot, things loosen up a little bit, or at least if you were to get the head hot and then move it around a bunch, you know, like if somebody takes their gear out on the road to cut records, this is probably why your cutter heads kept getting out of tune. A person who I won't name by name, and it's because you kept overdriving them. Everything got hot. When things get hot, metal expands. In fact, I believe for steel, it's something on the order of every 100 degrees Celsius, or is it Frankenstein? I can't remember. It's like a mil, right? Per 100 degrees Celsius, I think, per foot of steel or something like that. Anyway, Point of the matter is, the actual tuning of this head is all from the alignment of these pole pieces once you get everything together. So once we get this in with the armature and the coils, and like I said, we run some audio through it, and we've got the magnet flipped out the other way, so it's hanging this way, we will be adjusting these guys. And you'll, like I said, you'll hear it. When they're in exactly the right place, you'll hear it, you'll feel it, because it will be the most active at that point. The system will have the most vibration. And again, you'll lock everything into place. And that will be that. I mean, pretty much at that point, you're just going to do some real fine tuning maybe to the spring tension, but probably not a whole lot. Those are really just there as, again, I've explained what their purpose is before, so I don't know if I'm going to go into that 100% again. Well, whatever. They're there to center the stylus when there is no audio. So on unmodulated grooves, the stylus centers because of this spring system. Also, because there is tension on that in an unmodulated groove, you will have less background noise in unmodulated grooves that have good tension on their armature. The other thing that they are doing is adding dampening, right? Just like the actual damper does dampening, those things also dampen because they're applying tension to the armature. And because low frequencies are easy to achieve, if you add dampening and then add enough amplification, you will have high frequencies. Not only will that system then allow high frequencies, but momentum of the moving thing won't just roll over, all of the high frequencies with low frequencies. So that all being said, the final purpose to these springs, which I don't think I've actually covered before, is to keep the armature itself from bottoming out and tapping against the pole pieces. Because if you don't have anything there at all, if you have zero tension, the armature will just stick to a pole piece, period, and it won't move at all. If you have light tension, it will tap against the pole pieces, and you'll hear that as distortion in your audio. If you have just the right tension, then you will move within that gap on either side of the armature between the pole pieces, and only within that gap, and you won't bottom out. So those are all of the functions really of the springs. Any tension mechanism, not just these, but in the 5C, it's got a longer piece of steel that's used for a tension system, and it's different in other heads. Like I've gone into that before as well. So sorry to go down that little rabbit hole, but I wanted to introduce this concept because people have wondered for a while, what's the secret of these heads? And that's it right there. It is the positioning of these pole pieces, because that determines the positioning of both the coils and the armature, and that will determine if you're are you working with or against this system right here? Because again, this doesn't always have exactly perfect alignment. I've seen some heads where holes were definitely off by a little bit. So kind of to account for all of that, these things have some play. And also too, again, like it wasn't, these weren't super precision made. If it was super precision made, I would expect for there to be sort of grooves, guides on the base, so that these would sit in exactly the same place every time, but there isn't. And not only is there not, the holes are made, not only these holes, but the other holes where the screws go in through the magnet, right? The magnet gets locked down, and it gets locked down with screws that go through these two holes right here. But there's enough play in those holes even as well for this thing to move around. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, is because that's how you tune these heads. So you got to get all the stuff together and get it wired up and run audio through it. And once you do, like I said, I will show you this very clearly. You will get these things in just the right place, and this thing will hum. And it is all about the whole system together. It's not any one little thing. It's all of that stuff together. And really the tension that's provided by these springs has less to do with the overall efficiency, like how much movement you're going to get on the stylus given the same current being applied to the coils, right? So you can have it more or less efficient by these things being in exactly the right place or not, with everything else in them. And so that's tonight I think that's the biggest thing that I wanted to go over. So I'm going to get these coils in, and I'm going to lock, sort of temporarily, not very strongly, not with a lot of tension, but just get them basically locked into place, and then that will probably be it for tonight. In the next videos, I'll get the wiring all taken care of, and then in the third video, probably I will actually go and tune the head. So I just wanted to get started tonight. I really didn't want to do a huge long stream, but I wanted to at least cover the basics. And so do stick around, because if you think that you've actually heard everything that you need to hear, you have not. Definitely have not. So watch the upcoming streams for sure. Oops. Let me try to get into frame here. So I think I've covered this also. The coils, sometimes when you glue them, they will expand a little bit. Sometimes when you roll them, they will expand a little bit. So right now, I'm gonna have to get them in. I'm gonna have to squeeze them just a little bit to get them in, I think. You want to make sure that you're not going to ruin the coil leads. You also want to make sure that when you are pushing down on everything, that this is sitting on the knife edge properly, and that it's not riding it in on an angle. I'm just looking at which one is problematic, and I see it. I want you to do that. I see it's starting to bite in a little bit, and I don't want that to happen, because that's just, once it starts biting, it just problematic. So right now, I'm gonna work this guy in by hand. Get him started. It's this side. Like, all right. This is generally one of the parts that sucks. By A sneaky suspicion that I'm going to snap one of these leads on screen here. There you go. Mother junker. Can't sit in the way that it is right now. You can see it's just basically towards one side and the other one's biting, so that definitely not going to work. Oops. A bit more. Almost ready. Oh. Biting a little bit into the plastic, but it's okay. Has not ruined any of the covering wire, so I would remake this coil. One came out a little fat on one side, so that's what's causing all the headaches right now. Just deciding what I want to do. Might actually just stop and remake this one, to be honest with you. That sort of sucks. I don't really want to use something that's going to be problematic. Definitely is a pain in the butt. About the back one. try it again. The back one's fine. The front one, if it's giving me more problems, I'm just gonna remake it. Seems to have gone in okay. I will also verify that nothing bit in to the point where it's shorting against the body of the cutter head. It didn't. I mean, I could tell visually. I've got my magnifiers on, so I know it didn't. I have no idea if any of you could see any of that really, but basically I was just getting these guys to go in, actually squeeze in, and with the orientation that I want, like I was saying, I want the hole to be sort of facing out on both sides. Hole is facing out, hole is facing out. Getting those guys shoved in to hole pieces with, oriented correctly. Oh, ugh. Yeah. I really think I'm gonna remake this front coil because of what just happened right there. It's not going in evenly on one side, and I just don't like that. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe not. Just fixed it. Or I should say, I think I just got it to work with me. So this guy should be sitting, vertically, should be centered in the ends of those pole pieces. So I think I want to go down just a little bit more. And it's sort of a balance between the front and back. You can't just push down on one side, like if you're pushing down, you have to push down a bit on both coils. Otherwise, things will be lopsided. Find out, I suppose. Yeah, I may end up remaking one of these. Really won't know until I get it. So that's basically, they're in there now. And they're both aligned so that they're at the same height. The holes are at the same height, and there's no, I don't have restriction on the movement of that guy as a result of them being unevenly sitting. They're evenly sitting right now. That the hole right there is a little close to the pole piece, closer than I would like, but again, that front one was a little bit wider than it ought to have been, so this is biting me a little bit. Might end up remaking it. I don't know. See how it works. This stuff at least is temporarily in there. Loosen up the pole pieces again and show you guys how this thing can all sort of move as one part. And therein lies the rub. So I'm going to keep them relatively loose for now going and putting in these guys. And I want it to be loose because if this thing ends up, once it has pressure on it, ends up sitting in a way such that before, if these were tightened and pushing on it, then you could have pressure on the armature that you don't want. So you loosen these guys up before you put in the springs. And then once the springs are in place, you sort of align these guys so that by eye, it looks like the gap in between is pretty even. And then sort of temporarily lock things down and then do the electrical connections. And then once everything is connected electrically, you can actually start to see what's what. And finish out the tuning. So I'm just going to pop these guys in and then that'll probably be it. I am a little perturbed that I'm probably going to remake one of these coils. That sucks. It just means extra work. Planning on doing sort of lows. Should all be cupped, not just, or I should say, should be drilled. At least one of these should be drilled. Just cupped but socketed. So I just found the one that's definitely socketed. And I'm taking the end of the pin that is not the sharpened end. So there's an end that has sort of a point to it. Typically. There's another end that's rounded. This one looks kind of rounded on both, which is interesting. The more pointy end should go to onto the armature. I guess would be that one. So you do the center pin first, and again, I'm going to real quick sure that this guy is sitting correctly on the knife edge. So sort of it to move a little bit back and forth. with my thumb. Oops. Screw. Tighten this thing. Not only do I want to make sure that the armature is sitting on the edge properly, I want to make sure that that thing is coming across straight and not on an angle. I don't want to put too much pressure on, just enough to hold it in place. That bar is not on an angle really up or down, perpendicular. Something along the lines of that. Okay. Now when I look through that hole, I'm seeing the reciprocal hole for these two guys when I look through these two holes, so I know that things are pretty well in line. I'm going to take the other two screws and put them in and get them started. And can do the springs. And again, then I'm going to call it for tonight. Actually, probably make another coil because I just don't like that front one. It's not sitting right. It's just going to cause problems. The way that I can tell for sure it's going to cause issues. So I'm just going to, I mean, like, you know, I will do one of these for show right now, but because I'm going to redo that coil, I'm going to end up taking apart the whole head, apart all of what I've done. So what I did was just take a pair of tweezers and stick that guy in. You know, so, oops. A pair of tweezers. You can stick the one end down into the hole with the screw in it, and then it will have enough clearance such that you can get it positioned underneath the other part with the hole, like I just did, and stick it up in there. It should actually kind of stick in place. And now I can go ahead and just get it all tightened into place. When you do that, you want to make sure that before you put a lot of pressure on, sometimes these little guys won't sit exactly in the cup. You want to make sure that you got it exactly seated in that cup with your tweezers, and you could feel when it goes in there. Right now it's riding. I can tell it's riding on the edge. It's not in the center. I think, yep, there you go. You don't want to be applying pressure to these things when they're askew, right? You want to make sure that it's in that cup appropriately there and in that cup appropriately up there. So position it perfectly before you go ahead and tighten it down. And like I said, right now we're not actually trying to tighten. We're just getting these in and into place. Oops. And that's all. Not tightening them down at this point. Just a little bit, or just a little bit. Yeah, I'm doing that all off. Again, if you're screwing it and that thing looks like it's sort of doing this dance around, that means that it's not in the cup appropriately. If you're screwing it and it's not moving around, then it's in the cup. So right now, it's in the cup. I felt it go in. So I'm screwing it. It's not like doing this sort of like motion like that. It's staying on an axis, and so you know it's in the cup. Okay, so I've seen some guys made these point up and down. I like to have them point the way that they're pointing right now, which would be, side to side. And I'll show you why later. When you point them up and down, they're easier to hold on to with like a pair of pliers. Because when you turn these, those things will move, but they need to be aligned the same. So if one of them is like pointing like that, and one of them is, one of them sort of pointing down, and one of them is pointing to the side, that won't work right. Got to have them. So each one could be pointing, one could be pointing completely down, one could be pointing completely up, or they could both be pointing completely to the sides like this. But they can't be at differing angles. They have to be at matching angles. And the originals were side to side, but again, it's hard to keep them in place. As you turn that screw, you have to actually hold those with something. Otherwise, they'll start to move. And then if you get it screwed to the right place and then move that thing, it'll change the tension. So what I did was I made a little tool from brass, just a piece of brass scrap. Unfortunately, you can't use plastic. You need to use metal, and aluminum is probably not the best either. I made a little tool to go in there and hold those things side to side. And so now I can change the tension, right, on these screws, and those little bends will have the same orientation. They're not going to be moving up and down as I change the tension on the screw. And once I'm finished and I pull this guy out, they are side to side instead of up and down. And I think that works better. I like it better side to side. It's meant to be, because of the way that the mechanism tilts, it's meant to be side to side, not up and down. It's just up and down is easier to hold on to with a pair of pliers or something, pair of needle noses. Unless you get crafty and creative like me and you make a tool to hold everything in place, which I'm guessing is something like along the lines of what they probably used, was something like that. So there's a big secret there is, I made myself a tool to keep those guys in place. They need to be on the same angle. They could be pointing side to side like that or up and down. Side to side is the proper way for them to be with this mechanism. And again, I didn't tighten them so that they were too tight or anything. And now I can sort of, I could untighten these guys completely. And there's a little bit of play to them. And so now I could like adjust the gap on either side, and a little bit of forward and backward play like that, as you can see. And once you get everything just so, you'll hear it, you'll feel it, like I said, and you'll lock it into place, right? And you're going to be making sure that you've got the proper amount of gap on each side, there and there, and that it's sitting vertically where it needs to be sitting, like that. And these springs and that center pin are not on an angle up or down, they're perpendicular. And what else can I mention? Once we actually put a steel cone stylus, not a sapphire or anything, but just something in there so that we can start to see perpendicular, if the armature is actually being held perpendicular, and that's where we'll actually do some adjustment to these springs to make sure that the armature is being held perpendicular, and then we'll adjust all the rest of the stuff around that. So that's one of the things I would probably do at this point right now, is stick a stylus in there and then adjust these two springs so that that stylus is sitting perpendicular with respect to the body, not with respect to the pole pieces, because the pole pieces are loose right now and they're not precision, but with respect to the end of the body, is that stylus being held perfectly perpendicular? Once it is, then we build up the rest of the system around that. So I'm going to end it here for today. Like I said, I might actually redo that forward coil. Kind of not real super happy with it. Next time around, I will show you how to deal with the wire leads and do all of that, and connect them to actual leads going in, and we could run some audio through it with the magnet flipped out, and we can start to do a bit of the tuning on it. So I think I'm gonna end the stream at this point. Thank you guys. Thank you everybody for checking out my work. Definitely please do subscribe to me on YouTube, and we'll see you all next stream. So like if you like my work on YouTube, dislike it if you dislike my work or me. That's totally cool. Please comment as well, or ask questions in comments. I will answer most of them. Please, please, please do subscribe. Be well, and take care of yourselves. Please be kind to others. And I'll see you all next time. Take care.